First business item now is potential dedication of trail and wood trails project. Would you like me to start with that? Okay, I'm going to pass the gavel so that I can speak to this to the deputy mayor, please. Was it last Wednesday? I might get the timeline wrong, but last Wednesday I went to Public Spaces meeting and spoke there. And at the end of the meeting, which I'd already left, Public Spaces had talked about Charles and Roy Gazamora had talked about dedicating this trail or loop to Dave Henry. Both of them reached out to me with this idea, and based on the late notice, I thought it was a great idea. I had multiple conversations with both, and I asked Roy to reach out to Nancy, and he did that, and I appreciate that. And Charles took me on a tour of one of the more common trails that Mr. Henry was on and had taken care of. So that was really a good experience. And then I took the opportunity to go down to the next cul-de-sac, which I think is 198th, and look at that cul-de-sac. I talked to a few neighbors about what was going on. They weren't aware that it was even a park, but we had a good conversation. So that was good. I think this is a thing that we could do. Dave was certainly a fixture up in Wellington, and with wood trails, I don't think there's anybody that cared more about it. I don't think there's certainly anybody that actually took a more active part over the years. He was here, and he had lots of great stories about the old days, which I always like hearing. So I would, I'd like to make a motion on this so that we dedicate the trail or loop to Dave's trail or loop. And then I can open, I guess. That's all I have to say, and then I'd like to make a motion, please.
Yeah, I have a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I don't have a whole lot more to add than when I talked about the presentation. I thought Public Spaces had a great idea with this. I think this dedication is appropriate, and it's going to be, doing it early will be very cost friendly when we start on the signage and the hazard mitigation. So I think this is certainly something that the council should adopt.
Councilmember Campbell?
I would actually like to make an amendment to the motion. As the motion sits right now, we are just agreeing to name a future trail. And those of us who know Dave Henry know that he was a man of action, sometimes acting with the first thought that came into his mind, which what is it that I can do for my community? So I think it's great that we name a trail after Dave Henry, but I would like to see an actual trail be built for Dave Henry. So I would ask that we amend the main motion to request staff to provide an RFP for construction on the Wood Trails project within the next month, so that we can actually have a project and a trail to name as opposed to a promise.
Second.
All right, we have if I recall correctly, it must be germane to the original motion.
That is correct. I am suggesting that we ask staff to bring back an RFP so that when Mr. Henry's trail is named, we have a trail to dedicate as opposed to a promise to name the trail.
Any further discussion?
The maker of the motion gets an opportunity to speak first. I met Dave Henry 4 years ago in his garage with a stack of cheese for his rescue beagles and tea that he had set up for us. When I first presented my idea for wood trails to him, he was skeptical, as Dave Henry was skeptical of a lot of new people he meets. But in our conversations, we talked about the importance of the trails to the community, what it means to the people in that neighborhood. And if you know Dave Henry, you know that he's never met a stranger. He was never afraid of striking up a conversation with people, and he was never afraid of sharing what was important to him. And what was important to him are those trails, not the concept of the trail, but the physicality of the trail. And my guiding light has always been, think about what it is that people want. They want something physical, they want something real. It's a connection. So I think that making this trail a reality, not a promise to name it, but motion, action to move it forward is what is important. This is a discussion. This is, we will name a future trail at some point, but it is not a commitment to build a trail anytime soon. So I'm asking for a concrete commitment on this council to move this project forward and bring forth a request for proposal to build this trail out so that we can truly honor Dave Henry in the way he would like to be honored, which is with action, not words.
Mayor Milman.
Thank you. So I oppose the amendment, and here's why. My motion was designed with conversations with public spaces, conversations with the public spaces liaison, also conversations with city staff on what I did not want to tie the city's hands on before we actually have the final trail design, before we actually get the park impact fees that are going to be used to build the trails. We don't, we already have in the budget money to build out the trails. We don't have final design, so I think in the Wood Trails design, there's a red loop that's highlighted, and that's the one that I'm generally talking about. I don't exactly know if that's going to be the final. We've talked about having Washington Trails involved in helping us build out that trail and loop. We don't have that finalized yet, and we haven't received our pending park impact fees. So I think the amendment makes it onerous on a staff that is really, really working hard right now. I think it makes it more complicated than it needs to be. And I also think that, if there is if a change in what trail we're talking about or where that trail stops and starts or how we do that, I think it's a little bit cleaner the way I propose it. So I can't support the amendment.
Councilmember Evans.
Just remind us, Mr. City Manager, we have already budgeted money for building out wood trails, and all we're waiting for are our development fees that are pending, correct?
The project right now, as it stands in the budget, has two pieces. We had kind of the initial hazard mitigation, some initial signage project, which was budgeted. I think that, off the top of my head, I don't have the budget book in front of me, it was about $65,000, if I remember right. And then on top of that, council budgeted for construction of the project, contingent on receipt of impact fees, which we haven't collected yet this year. But when we do that, we can start that process. That process, as council's mentioned, we'll need to start with final design of that project, which is not done yet. We've done the conceptual design for that project, but we haven't done all the bidding document or the design documents that would ultimately go into the bid package. So that would be the first step. And then design would follow, or construction would follow that.
And how much staff time is required to do an RFP of this nature in a 4-week time period?
We'd have to discuss if that would be a full-on solicitation for a design team, or if it would fit underneath one of our on-call engineering contracts that the city has. So I don't have an answer for that now, depending on which route we go. If it's utilizing the on-call, then it can be relatively quick. It's still probably a month to get the task order issued and put together. If we've got to go full solicit firms to do that work, it's several months before we have that contract ready for council.
And do we want to have our Public Spaces Commission be a part of any of this, or do they wait until the RFP comes back?
They will likely be part of the design process. They wouldn't necessarily be part of the in this case, they likely wouldn't be part of the solicitation or a task order for the engineering firm. They sometimes are involved in that process when we're soliciting design firms for something like like when we did DeYoung Park several years ago, to try to get a team that I think understood what the city's vision for that space was. But this one, I think, is a slightly different project where it's pretty straightforward what we're looking to do on the project.
And is there anything stopping us from naming the main trail that's sort of already there that Mr. Henry worked on so hard, that was outlined in the red?
Mm-hmm. There's nothing stopping council from doing that now.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Campbell?
Thank you. My motion is intended to demonstrate that this is feel good, which I think that Mr. Henry deserves all of the good feelings because he was a great man. What I'm requesting is that we honor him with action. Staff has not responded to emails that I had sent about where we stand on when we are going to be sending out a request for proposal. So I can't say that I can point to anything that staff has told me. But we've changed tactics on a lot of things in our budget. And if we've budgeted for it, we have the ability to do it. It's about the gumption to do it. If this council doesn't have the gumption to do it, that's one thing. But to fall back and say, staff can't switch gears if we ask them to change priorities, I don't think that's a fair assessment. If we want something, we vote for it. But we're naming a trail that doesn't exist, and we're not putting a time frame on when any of this is going to occur, and we fall back on the feel-good statement of, well, staff is very busy on other things, when this is a budget item, the same as everything else in our budget. So I'm asking, if we truly honor David Henry, then we honor him by acting on creating these trails so that we have something to dedicate. Otherwise, all we're talking about is congratulations for naming a trail that doesn't exist. And to me, a dedication means you have something to dedicate, not just an empty promise for a future date that is ill-defined.
Might I say something?
Sorry, not just at this moment. We'll have another part of public comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a question for City Manager. Would it be possible to shift the funds that we're going to use for signage into possibly looking into the RFP? Or have we already committed?
I think there's, I'm trying to spare too much details on it, but we've got the issue of, we've now dedicated it as a park, technically open to the public. We have now the duty of care of that existing facility that we need to address because we've opened it to the community. So that's where the signage and probably more importantly, any hazard mitigation that needs to be done up there on existing trails needs to be done in short order from a risk management perspective.
All right, I guess any other, Councilmember Arndt.
I am frustrated at what has been intended to be an effort to honor a member of our community who is really engaged in our civic life as a city is being hijacked to push a project forward that we as a council have decided it was in the city's best interests to wait on the reception of park impact fees. I still believe that using our park impact fees for this project is the best use of our budget. And while I would love to go and put a stake in the ground tomorrow and cut a ribbon and open this park to the public, I think it is disingenuous to say this is an issue of will, and more appropriate to say that this is an issue of being responsible with our funds as a city. I do not support the amendment because of that, but I do support the intention of dedicating a trail, and I do believe that as the park impact fees become available, we can have further conversation about how quickly we can move to make this a reality.
Second time, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So I would like to reiterate, I mean, I was on the trail. I was on the trail with Mr. Venley last Wednesday, Thursday. There is an existing trail. It's a rough trail, and it's the one that we're talking about that Mr. Henry worked on, and I think that's probably why he has a machete out there. So that trail does exist. I was on it not that long ago. My motion was made after considerable conversation with Public Spaces, who the original tribute it originated from, and talking to our liaison in Public Spaces, and also talking to staff. And I can tell you right now, staff is, I'm around City Hall fairly often, and staff is really busy. We have a trip to Olympia being planned to lobby for stuff that's very important to Woodinville, and we're trying to get that right. We have a trip to Washington, D.C. to try to procure money and the ability to pull up a rail. There's grant proposals that the city is really working on. If you came in recently in the daytime, you'd see the solar panels going on. There's all kinds of things. So my motion was made in concert with Public Spaces liaison and another council member and staff to make it a tribute to Mr. Henry, but also something that we can achieve. So I think that this is the more responsible direction to go, and it doesn't take away from what we're trying to honor Mr. Henry with and his efforts for the city. So I cannot support this amendment. Thank you.
Second time, Councilmember Evans.
Thank you. Mr. Buchanan, did we have the design that was in our council notes that I'm looking at on screen that we could put up on the screen so that our audience can see what we're talking about?
You just have to give me just a moment. I'll get that pulled up.
Okay, and then while you're looking for that, are we still on track to get our park impact fees sometimes in the next 3 to 6 months, as far as you know?
We, at least for one of the development projects downtown, we're expecting to be issuing permits here imminently, as in this week. And so we should have park impact fees are paid at the time that those building permits are issued.
Which at that time is going to be more than $2 million?
I don't
No.
think it's that much for parks. It's $3,000 a unit. So if we put in
How many units?
600.
203. Yeah, I think 203.
Okay, so it's a portion of our park impact fees.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know it's really hard to see. It's hard to see on my screen as well. But I believe we're talking about the red area, which what I can tell is the Wood Trails Loop 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the Upland Trail Loop 7, and the Valley Trail 8 is what it looks like to me, although it's hard to read. So I just want to put it on record that that is what we're talking about. And we are on track still to get some imminent park impact fees that we have already allocated in our budget towards building this out.
Yes, and I think to build on that, I think listening to council's kind of interest in this, I think is a viable opportunity. Of course, it's council's decision, but that is a trail, as the mayor mentioned, Mr. Henry worked on. It's an existing trail. When we talk about kind of the hazard mitigation and signage initial project, it's looking at that red trail and figuring out if there's anything that needs to be fixed from a safety perspective, and then signing the entrances to the existing trail. So that would be an opportunity if council was inclined to look at that trail to honor Mr. Henry, that we could, as we do that signage, honor him with that signage.
Yeah, and I know the last few times he was here at council, one of his biggest requests was please get out here and maintain this because it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort. So thank you.
Councilmember Taylor.
Yes, thank you. My brain is kind of hurting on this because I have known Dave for probably 20 years and Nancy Montgomery as well. Great people, very civic-minded, looking out for safety. You might remember those signs that when you come into the city, welcome you and to respect all forms of pedestrians, bicycles, motorcycles, but all of those as you come into the city limits. That was one of Dave's ideas. Also, some of the SNAP projects that he did with the speed bumps and all. Very, very much an action-driven person. He brought these into emergency preparedness commissions and planning and was looking for action. And that's how I remember Dave speaking at the podium, telling us his name, that he lives in the United States of America, as and last time he checked. And he was trying to get us off our talking and get action to our words. And so that's why I'm seconding and supporting this, because I know if we get down to it, if it's really not money, because the money we already have talked to finance, and Wayne said that it's very common to start a project and then pay it back when the funds come in. So you just move money from one account to another. So you take it from general fund and then you reconvert credit memo type standard accounting procedure to put it into the right account when the money comes in. So I don't see this as a big ask. I think it's worthwhile given, the intent is to do something, not just to say we're going to name something. We're going to do something. Dave was a man of action and called us to action. And so maybe we need to stretch a little and do something. That's it. Thank you.
Once again, Mr. City Manager, you mentioned that these funds were imminent, correct? The park impact fees?
Right. We should, if the permits that we anticipated are issued this week, we should have some amount of park impact fees shortly thereafter.
Okay. So one of the things that comes to mind for me is I also knew Dave personally, and I wondered if you would want us to do deficit spending on this. It looks like the funds are imminent. I am a bit disappointed that this became something other than a dedication to the
Point of clarification. It would not be deficit spending. That's just the point. Don't use that word. That's not accurate.
I am making my point, sir. Your point is not recognized. If we're going to spend money today that we have not gotten yet, I consider that deficit spending. If the money is coming in imminently is what I heard, and I think we've reiterated that several times, and I've heard a couple of weeks. I believe that's the right thing to do. As I was saying, I am disappointed that this has become something other than a dedication to Dave Henry. That we actually turned this into, I understand that he was a man of action. I appreciate that it was brought up. As a matter of fact, he is a rambunctious character. Maybe this is right on brand. But one of the things that I recall about him is when he found out that I was running for city council, he invited me to come sit at his house. I definitely wanted to know what he wanted to talk about. Up until then, I knew him as the guy that walked the dogs in the neighborhood. He had a group of rescue beagles that he would walk every day. And we saw him time and time again. And those are some of the favorite memories I have because our kids were young. And they saw this cool guy with all these dogs. I sat in his yard for about 2 hours under a Trump sign. And we had so many things that we agreed on. It was about the city. It was about our belief in our neighborhood. You can always find things to agree on. So it frustrates me to no end that we cannot find agreement to dedicate something to this man and not make it about something else. I would like to take a vote on this issue. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Evans?
No.
Councilmember Robstello?
No.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Millman?
No.
Councilmember Arndt?
No.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
No. Back to the original amendment of dedicating this trail to Dave Henry, making this park a reality once the funds are received. Can we take a second roll call vote on the original motion?
Councilmember Evans?
Yes.
Councilmember Robstello?
Yes.
Councilmember Best-Campbell?
Yes.
Mayor Millman?
Yes.
Councilmember Arndt?
Yes.
Councilmember Taylor?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Randolph?
Yes. Thank you so much for supporting Dave and all of his antics. Thank you for coming to sit. I know this is probably a very painful time for you and your family. Thank you for coming to support this action. I will hand back the gavel as we move on to what is now action number 7.